When you tell an avoidant, "I love you," you expect it to land softly, to reassure them, to deepen the bond. But what you don't see is how their mind immediately translates those three words into something heavier, something more dangerous, something tied to pressure rather than comfort. It's not the love they fear, it's what they believe comes attached to it. To an avoidant, "I love you" isn't just affection, it's responsibility, it's expectation, it's emotional weight. It's the fear that now they must show up in a way they've never been taught to, and that one day they will disappoint you. The moment you say it, the avoidant hears an invisible echo in their head. "Now you want something from me." This doesn't mean they don't want your love. They do. They feel deeply. They crave connection. But love for them has always carried obligations they were never emotionally prepared for. They grew up associating love with pressure, demands, inconsistency, or even abandonment. So when someone expresses love, their nervous system triggers a response before they can even analyze it. They tighten up. They pull back slightly. They become more guarded. It's not rejection, it's self-protection. Avoidants fear what they think love will require from them: endless closeness, emotional availability, vulnerability on command, sharing parts of themselves they've spent years keeping locked away. They don't fear you, they fear losing control of their emotional world. They fear becoming responsible for someone's happiness. They fear being seen too clearly. They fear that love will expose the softest parts of them, and that if those parts are rejected or misunderstood, the pain will be unbearable. So while most people hear, "I love you," and feel warmth, avoidants often feel a tightening in their chest. They feel anticipation, not ease. Their mind starts preparing for deeper emotional expectations. They begin worrying about what happens next. Their internal alarms start ringing because love, in their experience, is unpredictable, and unpredictable things feel unsafe. But here's the paradox. Avoidants times want times love. They want closeness, connection, tenderness. They just don't know how to trust it when it shows up. They don't know how to believe it will last. They don't know how to rely on it without fearing it will one day disappear. Every time someone expresses love, the avoidant feels a quiet fear rise inside. What if I can't give them what they need? What if this ends the same way everything else did? These fears make them retreat even when love is exactly what they desire. They also associate "I love you" with a shift, a change in the relationship dynamic. To them, love doesn't stay gentle. It becomes heavier with time. It becomes more demanding. It becomes something they feel they will eventually fail at. So the moment you say it, they subconsciously brace for what they think comes next. Intensity, closeness, expectations, emotional requests they don't know how to meet. They brace for the loss of freedom. They brace for the fear of disappointing you. They brace for the possibility of losing themselves inside the relationship. What most people misunderstand is this: avoidants aren't cold. They're scared. They aren't unloving. They're overwhelmed. They aren't rejecting affection. They're protecting their survival system. So when you tell an avoidant, "I love you," it doesn't sink in the way you hope. It hits a part of them that is still trying to figure out what love is supposed to feel like. They want to accept it. They want to relax into it. They want to believe in it. But love has always been a complex, unpredictable experience for them. It has always been intertwined with fear. That's why "I love you" doesn't touch an avoidant the way you think, not because they don't feel it, but because they fear everything that might come after those words. And until love feels safe in their body, not just their mind, those three words will always activate their defenses before they activate their heart. Avoidants live in an emotional world that almost no one sees, not because they don't have feelings, but because their feelings run so deeply that showing them feels dangerous. They're not cold, detached, or numb, they are times-controlled asterisk. They've spent years mastering the art of appearing calm on the outside while battles rage inside their chest. When someone gets close, especially someone who genuinely cares, that emotional world becomes even more intense. And instead of opening up, their instinct is to protect themselves by shutting down, withdrawing, or disconnecting just enough to feel safe again. What most people misunderstand is that distance is not their default personality, it's their shield. It's the only way they've ever learned to manage the intensity of their emotions. While you see someone who is quiet or aloof, Inside, they're feeling everything with a depth that might shock you. They notice your tone, your effort, your disappointment, the way your eyes shift, the way your energy feels. Avoidants are hyper-aware. They pay attention to tiny details because their nervous system is constantly scanning for emotional danger. And yet, they pretend not to notice because acknowledging it would force them to face their own vulnerability. Deep down, they crave connection more than the average person. They dream of being seen, understood, accepted. They want closeness, tenderness, safety. But the moment those things appear, fear rises inside them like a wave. Fear of getting too close, fear of losing themselves, fear of disappointing you, fear of needing you, fear of being abandoned once they finally let their guard down. Their longing and their fear sit side by side, and this combination creates an emotional chaos they rarely let anyone witness. When someone loves them, when someone tries to get close, the avoidant feels two conflicting urges: let them in and protect yourself. This split creates internal panic. You touch their hand and it feels warm, comforting, but inside, they're terrified of what that comfort might mean. You ask how they're feeling, and part of them wants to answer, but the louder part says, don't go there. They want to stay in the moment, but the moment also feels like a threat. They want intimacy, but intimacy feels like exposure. They want connection, but connection feels like obligation. And so they retreat, not because they don't feel, but because they feel times too much asterisk. Not because they don't care, but because caring wakes up wounds they've tried to bury. The closer they get to someone meaningful, the more those old emotional memories surface, memories of being let down, pressured, or misunderstood. They begin assuming that what happened before will happen again, and their emotional world responds with survival mode distance. This is the secret life of an avoidant. They run not from others, but from the intensity within themselves. They make excuses, telling themselves they're better alone, but loneliness eats them quietly. They pretend independence is all they want, but they ache for connection in ways that scare them. They push people away, then feel the loss even more deeply because they know they created it. They crave depth, but fear the vulnerability required to experience it. They associate closeness with danger because at some point in their life, closeness times was times dangerous. And yet, their emotional world softens the moment they feel accepted instead of pressured, understood instead of pushed, safe instead of chased. They open slowly, subtly, tentatively, not because they don't want to open faster, but because going slow is the only way they've ever learned to survive closeness. The avoidant's emotional world is full of longing they never express, softness they rarely show, and love they struggle to put into words. So when you see them pull away, don't mistake it as lack of feeling. It's the opposite. They're overwhelmed with feelings they can't yet hold. Their emotional world isn't empty, it's overflowing. And until someone makes that world feel safe, distance will always be their first language, not because they don't want connection, but because connection is the very thing their heart has been afraid to trust. There are 3 words that slip past every layer of an avoidant's defenses. 3 words that reach them in places I love you never could. 3 words that make their breath catch, because they don't trigger fear, they trigger safety. These words don't demand closeness, they don't rush them, they don't corner them, they don't attach expectations. Instead, they give the avoidant exactly what their nervous system has been deprived of their entire life: reassurance without pressure. And because of that, these 3 words pierce through walls they've spent years building. They speak directly to the child inside them who never received consistency. They speak to the adult who still fears abandonment but hides it under a careful mask of independence. These 3 words tell them that love doesn't have to cost them their freedom, that connection doesn't have to suffocate them, that closeness doesn't require losing themselves. Avoidants respond to these 3 words differently from the way most people do. They don't get emotional openly. They don't melt immediately. They don't confess their fear or gratitude. Their reaction is internal but intense. The moment they hear these words, their body relaxes in a way they didn't expect. Their chest loosens, their mind stops racing, the urge to run quiets. They feel something they rarely feel: relief. Relief that they are not being asked to be anything more than they can be in that moment. Relief that they are not being judged for their pace, their hesitation, or their fear. Relief that staying close won't cost them their sense of self. Relief that they can breathe inside the connection instead of suffocating under it. What makes these words powerful is that they strike the exact emotional wound avoidants carry. Most of them grew up in environments where affection felt unpredictable or conditional. They learned that love could vanish without warning. They learned that closeness came with pressure. They learned that their emotions weren't safe. They learned that being vulnerable meant being hurt. So, as adults, they protect themselves by assuming no one will truly stay. They don't consciously think this, but their body does. Their fear isn't irrational, it's learned. Their walls aren't stubbornness, they're survival. These three words trigger the opposite emotional response. Instead of activating fear, they deactivate it. Instead of triggering distance, they create closeness. Instead of overwhelming them, they calm them. These words communicate, without demanding anything in return, that the avoidant is not being abandoned, not being rushed, not being judged. They communicate that the relationship has room for their imperfections, that their fear is understandable, that their pace is acceptable, that the connection doesn't depend on perfection or constant closeness. And because these words acknowledge the avoidant's core fear without making them feel flawed for having it, they create trust in a way no romantic expression of love ever could. They hear these words and something shifts internally. They begin to reconsider their assumptions about you. They begin to feel safer, lighter, less guarded. They start to allow small moments of vulnerability that they used to resist. They begin staying present longer. They begin responding more openly. They begin trusting a little more each time. They begin showing small pieces of themselves because the fear of being pushed, rushed, or judged has softened. These three words communicate that they can grow emotionally without being forced into emotional performance, and that is what touches them most deeply. The freedom to open slowly, naturally, without pressure. Avoidants don't respond to intensity. They respond to safety. They don't respond to pressure. They respond to stability. They don't respond to demands. They respond to patience. These three words reach them because they make love feel like something they can handle, something they can believe in, something they can stay for. They hit deeper than, "I love you," because they promise the one thing the avoidant longs for but never says out loud: connection that doesn't hurt. What makes these three words feel safer than love itself is the way they calm the avoidant's entire nervous system. Avoidants don't respond to intensity. They respond to emotional environments that feel spacious, steady, and predictable. They need to know that closeness won't turn into pressure, that affection won't suddenly become obligation, that vulnerability won't be demanded from them before they're ready. They need to feel like they can breathe inside the connection instead of being swallowed by it. And these three words create exactly that kind of emotional space, a space where love is not something they must perform, prove, or protect themselves from, but something they can simply exist within. For most people, love feels warm and comforting. For avoidants, love has often felt like weight. It has felt like expectations rising silently behind the sweetness. It has felt like responsibility wrapped in affection. So when someone tells them, "I love you," the avoidant's body often responds with tension, not because they don't feel the same, but because they subconsciously expect that the next step will require more of them emotionally than they can handle. They fear losing themselves inside someone's needs. They fear being asked to go deeper before they're ready. They fear becoming responsible for someone else's emotional stability. This fear is not conscious, it's instinctive, learned from a lifetime of feeling safest when emotionally distant. But the three words that touch an avoidant deeper than love do not carry that emotional weight. They do not imply expectation. They do not ask for anything. They do not demand emotional reciprocity. Instead, they tell the avoidant one thing: you are safe exactly as you are. These words give them permission to stay present without the fear of being overwhelmed. They create room for the avoidant to move at their own pace, slowly, carefully, authentically. They let the avoidant know that love isn't something they have to rush into or run away from. When they hear these words, something inside them unwinds. Not quickly, not dramatically, but unquestionably. Their shoulders relax, their breathing softens, the tension in their jaw loosens. Their guarded expression fades for a moment, because these words reassure them that they can exist in the connection without being swallowed by it. They don't have to overthink. They don't have to manage anyone else's emotions. They don't have to hide parts of themselves out of fear that vulnerability will become expectation. For once, they can just times be times without fear of losing control. The reason these words feel safer than love is because they speak directly to the avoidant's oldest wound, the fear of abandonment mixed with the fear of enmeshment. They've always believed closeness comes with a demand. They've always believed that once someone gets too close, the avoidant must sacrifice their autonomy, their identity, or their emotional boundaries. But the three words that reach them say the opposite. They say, "You don't have to change to be here. You don't have to rush to be worthy. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to perform to keep someone close." These words make them feel like love can be a calm place, not a battlefield. They make intimacy feel like a choice, not a trap. They make vulnerability feel like safety, not surrender. And slowly, with time, they begin associating the person who speaks these words with something rare: emotional security. They begin trusting more. They begin staying longer. They begin sharing pieces of themselves they once hid, not because they were pushed, but because the environment feels safe enough to step into. Avoidants don't fall for intensity. They fall for stability. They fall for emotional environments that make their fear unnecessary. They fall for people who don't turn love into pressure. And those three words, the ones that promise patience, space, and presence, become more powerful than any confession of love, because they create the one thing an avoidant has been deprived of their entire life: a connection that allows them to keep their freedom while slowly opening their heart. That is why these words feel safer than love itself, because they make love finally feel like something they can stay for. The moment these three words sink into an avoidant's heart, something begins to shift inside them that even they don't fully understand. It doesn't happen instantly. It doesn't happen dramatically. It happens slowly, quietly, like warmth spreading into a room that's been cold for years. Avoidants don't wake up one day and suddenly tear down all their walls. Their defenses have been built over a lifetime. But these three words, words that don't demand, don't pressure, don't push, begin something powerful. They create safety. And safety, for an avoidant, is the only environment where their walls can truly fall. At first, the shift is barely noticeable. They find themselves lingering a little longer. Their responses feel a little softer. Their tone becomes more gentle, even if they try to hide it. Their eyes stay on you for just an extra moment before they look away. These small changes might seem insignificant to the outside world, but inside an avoidant, they are massive. Because avoidants do not soften unless something inside them feels secure. They do not let their guard slip unless a deeper part of them trusts that they won't be overwhelmed, judged, or abandoned. These three words plant a seed of trust, not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that grows in moments when they're alone, the kind that makes them think about you unexpectedly, the kind that brings them back after moments of distance, the kind that allows them to entertain a thought they usually shut down. Maybe this is different. Maybe I can breathe here. Avoidants are not opened through conversations. They are opened through environments. And these words create an emotional environment where they don't have to protect themselves at every moment. They don't have to stay one step ahead. They don't have to overthink their reactions. They don't have to hide every vulnerable instinct. They don't have to act stronger, colder, or more detached than they truly are. This is when the cracks in their armor begin to show. Not because they are weak, but because they finally feel safe enough to stop pretending. They begin expressing small truths. Not dramatic confessions, small ones. "I missed you. That meant a lot to me. I liked being with you." These sentences might sound simple, but from an avoidant, they are monumental. They are signs that the walls are softening, not by force, but by trust. They may initiate more than before, even if inconsistently. They may stay in the moment instead of escaping it mentally. They may start to open up about things they never talked about, their fears, their past, their insecurities, their confusion. Avoidants don't share easily. Every piece they share is a risk to them. But those three words reassure them that taking emotional risks won't result in judgment or pressure. And slowly, these small cracks turn into something more. They begin allowing themselves to feel, not just observe. They begin allowing themselves to rely on you emotionally, even if quietly. They begin leaning into the connection instead of leaning away. Their defenses, which once felt like steel, begin feeling more like doors they can open and close, not walls they must hide behind forever. What truly breaks their walls is the realization that they won't be punished for needing space, nor abandoned for coming close. That they won't be rushed when they aren't ready, nor ignored when they are. That they can be both independent and connected. That their fear doesn't make them unlovable. That their pace doesn't make them a burden. And the more they feel this, the braver they become. They begin taking emotional steps they avoided for years. They initiate conversations. They express gratitude. They apologize. They show affection. They choose closeness instead of escaping it. They start showing you parts of their heart they never let anyone see. Not because they suddenly became secure, but because you created an emotional space where their fear didn't need to lead them anymore. Their walls don't fall with force, they fall with trust, with presence, with patience, with emotional safety. Those three words didn't just touch them, they began to transform them. They made them realize that connection doesn't have to hurt, that vulnerability doesn't have to destroy them, and that love can be something they step into instead of something they run from. If you want, I can now explain keynote 6 in 600 powerful words. There is a moment in every avoidance journey, a quiet, internal breaking point, when those three gentle, pressure-free words finally settle into the deepest part of them. It's the moment when their fear softens just enough for their heart to speak louder than their defenses. It doesn't happen quickly, it doesn't happen predictably, and it definitely doesn't happen because they were convinced, pushed, or persuaded. It happens because something inside them finally feels safe enough to choose connection over escape. This moment marks the shift from "I'm afraid to get close" to "I'm afraid to lose this." And that shift changes everything. At first, the avoidant doesn't even realize what's happening. They just notice subtle discomfort when they pull away. They feel something missing when the communication slows. They sense a quiet ache when there's distance, a heaviness they don't know how to name. Avoidants are used to escaping emotional intensity, but when they begin feeling something deeper, the old strategy doesn't work the same way. The silence they used to hide in now feels empty. The space they once relied on now feels cold. The distance that once protected them now feels like loss. They don't say it out loud, but something inside them whispers, "I don't want this connection to disappear." This is the moment those three words begin transforming them. They remember the safety they felt, the calmness, the lack of pressure, the way you didn't demand more than they could give. They remember how you didn't panic when they withdrew, how you didn't chase when they hesitated, how you didn't punish their fear. They remember the steadiness you offered, the patience, the acceptance. They realize that for the first time in their life, closeness didn't feel like a trap, it felt like comfort. And because of that, they start wanting what they used to run from. Their mind tries to resist it at first. It tells them to stay detached, stay guarded, stay in control. But their heart, softened by those three powerful words, starts pushing through the cracks. Their thoughts shift from fear to longing, from suspicion to curiosity, from avoidance to desire. They find themselves thinking about you in quiet moments. They imagine talking to you again. They replay the softness in your voice. They miss your presence. They miss the peace that came with it. And that longing becomes stronger than the fear that once controlled them. This is when the avoidant begins choosing you, not out of desperation, but out of recognition. They begin seeing that losing you would hurt more than the vulnerability required to keep you. They begin realizing that connection with you doesn't cost them their freedom. It expands their world instead of shrinking it. It comforts instead of suffocates. It supports instead of overwhelms. And that realization is something avoidants rarely experience, because their lives have taught them the opposite. The moment they choose you over their fear is not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, subtle, human. It might look like them reaching out first, sending a message without overthinking it, suggesting time together, opening up a bit more than usual, offering small details about their emotional world, letting you see a soft part of them. Their behavior becomes less about survival and more about connection. They begin acting from love rather than fear. They begin showing consistency where they once showed hesitation. They begin initiating where they once avoided. They begin trusting where they once doubted. They don't suddenly become secure, but they begin acting with the courage that safety allows. This is the moment those 3 words prove their power, because they didn't force the avoidant to open, they times invited times them. They didn't scare them into change, they reassured them into it. They didn't demand commitment, they inspired it. They didn't corner them, they freed them. And that freedom created the emotional conditions that made the avoidant choose connection willingly. The real truth is this: avoidants don't choose people who pressure them. They choose people who make their fear unnecessary. They choose people who make room for their pace, their wounds, their quiet steps toward closeness. They choose people who give them time to trust their own feelings. They choose people who make love feel like a safe place to land instead of a battlefield to survive. And when those 3 words finally help them feel that safety, that's when they step forward, not because they have to, but because they finally want times to.